Here we go. Chapter 3. She is called the Queen Mary, said Abeline's father, and you and your mom and I are going to sail on her on the way to London. What about Pellegrina? Said Abeline. I will not go, said Pellegrina. I will stay. Edward, of course, was not listening. He found the talk of the dinner table to be excruciatingly dull. In fact, he made a point to not listen. But then Abeline did something unusual, something that forced him to pay attention. As the talk about the ship continued, Abeline reached for Edward and took him from the chair and stood him up in her lap. And what about Edward? She said in her voice, high and uncertain. What about him, darling? Said her mother. Will Edward be sailing on Queen Mary with us? Well, of course, if you wish, although you're getting a little old to be playing with little dolls. Nonsense, said Abeline's father. Who would protect Abeline if Edward was not there? From the vantage point of Abeline's lap, Edward could see the whole table spread out in a way that he had never seen when he was seated in his own chair. He looked upon the glittering array of silverware and glass plates. He saw the amused looks of Abeline's parents, and then his eyes met Pellegrina's eyes. She was looking at him in the way a hawk hanging lazily in the air might look for a mouse on the ground. Perhaps the rabbit's fur on Edward's ears and tail and the whiskers on his nose had some dim memory of being hunted. A shiver went through him. Yes, said Pellegrina without taking her eyes off Edward. Who would watch over Abeline if the rabbit were not there? That night, when Abeline asked, just like she did every night, if there would be a story, Pellegrina said, Tonight there will be a story. Abeline sat up in bed. I think Edward needs to sit here with me too, she said, so he can hear the story too. I think that's best, said Pellegrina. Yes, I think the rabbit must hear the story. Abeline picked Edward up, sat him up next to her in bed, and arranged the covers around him. Then she said to Pellegrina, We're ready now. So, said Pellegrina, as she coughed, so the story begins with a princess. A beautiful princess? Asked Abeline. A very beautiful princess. How beautiful? You must listen, said Pellegrina. It's all in the story. Chapter 4. It's getting so good. Once there was a princess who was very beautiful. She shone as bright as the stars on a moonless night. But what difference did it make that she was beautiful? None. No difference. Why did it make no difference? Asked Abeline. Because, said Pellegrina, she was a princess who loved no one and cared nothing for love, even though there were many who loved and cared for her. At this point of her story, Pellegrina stopped and looked right at Edward. She stared deep into his painted-on eyes, and again, Edward felt a shiver. And so, said Pellegrina, still staring at Edward. What happened to the princess? Said Abeline. And so, said Pellegrina, turning back to Abeline, the king, her father, said that the princess must marry. And soon after this, a prince came from the neighborhood and from the neighboring kingdom, and he saw the princess, and immediately he loved her. He gave her a ring of pure gold. He placed it on her finger. He said these words to her, I love you. But do you know what the princess did? Abeline shook her head. She swallowed the ring. She took it from her finger and she swallowed it. That is what I think of love, said the princess, and she ran away from the prince. She left the castle and went deep into the woods. And so what? Said Abeline. What happened? And here's a picture of Grandma Pellegrina telling the story. There's Abeline there and the rabbit. And so the princess became lost in the woods. She wandered for many days. Finally, she came to a little hut. She knocked on the door. She said, Let me in. I'm cold. There was no answer. She knocked again. Let me in. I'm so hungry. A terrible voice answered her. The voice said, Enter if you must. The beautiful princess entered. she saw a witch sitting at the table counting pieces of gold. 3,622, said the witch. I'm lost, said the princess. What of it, said the witch. 3,623. I'm hungry, said the princess. Not my concern, said the witch. 3,624. But I am a beautiful princess, said the princess. 3,625, replied the witch. My father, said the princess, is a powerful king. You must help me or there will be consequences. Consequences, said the witch. She looked up from her gold, staring at the princess. You dare talk to me about consequences? Very well. We will speak of the consequences. Tell me the name of someone you love. Love? Said the princess. She stamped her foot. Why must everyone speak of love? Whom do you love? Said the witch. You must tell the name. I love no one, said the princess proudly. You disappoint me, said the witch. She raised her hand and with one finger said, Farthity fidgety! And the beautiful princess was changed into a warthog. What have you done to me? Sorry guys, Ox is here. What have you done to me? Squealed the princess. Talk to me of none of these consequences now, will you? Said the witch. She went back to counting her gold. 3,626, said the witch, as the warthog princess ran out from the hut and into the forest. The king's men were in the forest too. And what were they looking for? A beautiful princess. And so when they showed up to an ugly warthog, they shouted immediately, Get rid of it! No, said Abilene. Yes, said Pellegrina. The men took the warthog back to the castle and cooked it. When they were cooking it, inside the belly, they found a ring of pure gold. There were many hungry people in the castle that night, and many were waiting to be fed. So the cook put the ring on her finger, and everyone ate the warthog. And the beautiful princess had swallowed shone on the cook's hand as she wore the ring. The end. The end? Said Abilene. Yes, the end, said Grandma Pellegrina. But it can't be the end. Why can't it be? Because it came too quickly. Because no one's living happily ever after. That's why. Ah, and so, Pellegrina nodded. She was quiet for a moment. But answer me this. How can a story end happily ever after if there's no love? Well, it's late and we must go to sleep. Pellegrina took Edward from Abilene. She put him in bed and pulled the sheet up to his whiskers. She leaned close to him and she whispered, You disappoint me. After the old lady left, Edward laid in his small bed and stared at the ceiling. The story he thought had been pointless, but then most stories were pointless. He thought of the princess and how she had become a warthog. Ugh. How awesome. How awful. Edward, said Abilene, I love you. I don't care how old I'll get. I'll always love you. Yes, yes, thought Edward. He continued to stare up at the ceiling. He was mad for some reason. He didn't know why. He wished that Pellegrina had laid him on his side so he could see the stars. And then he remembered Pellegrina's description of the beautiful princess. She shone as bright as the stars in a moonless night. For some reason, Edward found comfort in those words. He repeated to himself, As bright as the stars on a moonless night, as bright as the stars on a moonless night, over and over again, until the first light of dawn appeared.